that Diana, Princess of Wales, has in fact been killed in that car accident.
Interesting. Sounds rather sort of bizarre, but I did go to Diana's coffin the day after I'd written it.
Princess Diana was loved by billions. Her funeral in 1997 was watched by over 2 billion people across the world, a level of grief nobody had ever seen before and nobody has seen since. She was buried on a small private island surrounded by water at her family's Althorp estate, a location chosen specifically to keep her safe and undisturbed. For 27 years, it worked. Then they opened the tomb. The Spencer family fought to keep what was found inside completely private. They failed. What was found inside has shaken everyone who knows the full story. Diana left something behind, and it was never meant to stay buried. The decision that shocked everyone. For almost 30 years, nobody touched it. No cameras, no visitors, no access. Diana's grave sat sealed and silent while the world moved on without her. Then suddenly, word came. The tomb was going to be opened. And people had one question. Why now? Why after 27 years? The answer that came out first was the one that hit hardest. William and Harry wanted to know. These were two men who had lost their mother when they were 15 and 12 years old. Two boys who stood in front of the entire world and walked behind their mother's coffin while cameras captured every step. They had grown up, had children of their own, and still carried that loss every single day. They wanted to know she was at peace. They wanted to know her grave was secure and that time had not damaged what should last forever. That was the human reason. Then came the official one. The island where Diana was buried sits on soft ground. Engineers discovered that over the years, the water levels around the island had been rising. The soil underneath was slowly shifting. Earl Spencer commissioned a private survey. The results were serious enough that something had to be done. Not an emergency, but urgent enough that it could no longer be ignored. Here is something most people do not know. Under British burial law, private graves built on land near water are required by law to be reviewed after a certain number of years. The legal review period passed at the 25-year mark. Diana's tomb was not reviewed until 2 years after that window opened. 2 years. And nobody has explained why they waited. What were they not ready to face? A small team was quietly put together. They arrived at Althorp before sunrise. The estate was closed. Most of the staff were kept away. No press, no announcement, just a handful of people who had all agreed to say nothing. One account suggests a forensic team was also brought in, led by an outside expert, described as independent from the royal family. But think about that for a moment. The grave is on private Spencer land. Nobody gets anywhere near that island without the Spencer family's permission. How independent could any team truly be? The team crossed the water. They moved toward the island, and what they were about to find inside that tomb would prove that Diana had not been sitting idle in her final months. She had been preparing. She had been planning. And she had been waiting for exactly this moment. The island that was built to keep her hidden. To understand what was found in that tomb, you first need to understand why that island was chosen, because it was not just a beautiful place to rest, it was a fortress. When Diana died on August 31st, 1997, the grief that followed was unlike anything the modern world had ever seen. Over 2 billion people watched her funeral. Flowers were piled outside Kensington Palace, so deep you could not see the gates. People wept openly in the streets for a woman most of them had never met. The pain was real, and it was everywhere. Her brother Earl Spencer was drowning in that grief too. But he also had a decision to make. Where do you bury the most famous woman in the world in a way that keeps her safe? He chose a small island in the middle of a lake on the Althorp family estate in Northamptonshire, the place where Diana grew up. But Spencer did not choose it only because it was home. He chose it because it was hard to reach. The water surrounding the island and the soft, muddy ground around it made it physically difficult for anyone to get close. He told the BBC that he was genuinely afraid people would try to disturb her grave. The island was the answer. For the funeral, a temporary bridge was built across the water just to carry her coffin to the burial site. The moment it was done, the bridge was taken down. Nobody would be walking over to that island uninvited. The path leading toward the water was lined with 36 oak trees, one for every year of Diana's life. Family members, including Prince William and the Queen, helped plant them. It was a quiet, painful tribute. Not everyone agreed with the burial plan. the Church of England pushed back. For someone of Diana's status, a consecrated church burial was the expected standard. That objection was quietly overruled and kept away from the public. Visitors who came to Althorp could pay their respects at a nearby memorial called the Temple, where some of Diana's own words were displayed.
"Don't step onto the concrete. You'll hear me getting told off for doing so in a moment."
Alongside a passage from Spencer's funeral speech. But the grave itself was off limits, completely. For 27 years, that island remained untouched, sealed, surrounded by water, reachable only by people the Spencer family chose to bring across. No palace officials, no royal representatives, nobody the institution could send. That matters more than it sounds. Because what was hidden inside that tomb was something Diana had deliberately placed somewhere the palace could never get to. The island was not just where she rested, it was where she kept what she needed the world to one day find. The morning they crossed the water. The estate was dark and quiet. The gates were closed. Most of the staff had been told to stay away. Only a small group of people knew what was happening that morning, and every single one of them had agreed to keep it secret. The team included preservation experts, structural engineers, and funeral service professionals. They moved carefully. Every step was documented. Every detail was photographed. This was not rushed. They understood what they were dealing with, and they treated it accordingly. Earl Spencer was there. Prince William was also reported to be present, though some accounts say he arrived later in the day. Harry's attendance has never been confirmed. Sources say he was kept informed throughout, and may have been connected by video call from California. Whether he watched from thousands of miles away as his mother's grave was opened is something nobody has answered directly. The work took hours. When the burial chamber finally came into view, everyone stopped. Nobody spoke. The room went completely silent for several minutes. It was not panic. It was not distress. It was the weight of the moment pressing down on everyone standing there. This was the first time since September 6, 1997, that any human being had looked at Diana's final resting place. 27 years of silence, and now this. Then they saw the coffin. It was lead-lined and completely intact. Here is something important to understand about that. Lead-lined coffins are not standard for private burials. They are used when someone needs the remains to be preserved over a very long period of time. They slow down decomposition significantly. They are expensive, and they are deliberate. The decision to bury Diana in a lead-lined coffin was made within 48 hours of her death in Paris. For context, royal and aristocratic lead coffins are usually commissioned weeks in advance. Someone made that decision extremely fast, and the use of lead suggests that whoever made it understood this grave might one day be reopened. The chamber itself had held up better than feared. The water damage was less severe than the survey had suggested. The structure was stable. The fears were real, but the worst had not happened. And then, during the assessment, the team found something that stopped everything. There were items in that burial chamber that had no documentation, objects that were not on the official funeral records, things that were not supposed to be there, things that someone had secretly placed inside before the coffin was sealed. Earl Spencer immediately asked everyone outside of immediate family to step back. What happened next was private, but the faces of the people who walked out of that chamber told the story. Something had been found, something significant, something that changed everything about why that tomb had been sealed for 27 years. What they found inside changed everything. When they looked inside that burial chamber, the first things they found were the items everyone knew about. The ones on the official record, photographs of William and Harry, a prayer book, a rosary given to her by Mother Teresa, who had died just 5 days after Diana. 5 days. Two of the most beloved women in the world, gone within the same week. The rosary that passed between their hands in the final period of both their lives has never been fully examined or explained, and perhaps it never will be. Then they found the locket. It was gold, tucked carefully into Diana's hands, and inside it were 2 tiny photographs. William and Harry, her boys, the 2 people she loved more than anything else in the world and was terrified of leaving behind. Think about that for a moment. In her final hours before that coffin was sealed, someone placed that locket into her hands, and inside it were the faces of 2 children who would grow up without their mother, who would stand in front of billions of people and walk behind her coffin at 15 and 12 years old, who would spend the rest of their lives carrying a loss that never fully healed. That locket was not a piece of jewelry, it was a mother's last embrace, the only way she had left to hold them. There was also a small crystal charm buried with her, engraved with the words, "Always believe." Most people would read that and think it was a sweet keepsake. But think about the woman who chose those words. A woman who had been lied to inside her own marriage, who had her private phone calls secretly recorded, who had been pushed out of the institution that was supposed to protect her, who had spent years being told she was unstable, difficult, and too much. For that woman to leave behind the words, "always believe," is not sweet. It is heartbreaking. It is the last message of someone who refused to be completely broken. But then came the things that were never supposed to be found. Items with no documentation, no record, nothing on any official list. Objects that had been secretly placed inside that coffin before it was sealed, and nobody outside a very small circle had known about them for 27 years. There were sealed envelopes, letters written in Diana's own handwriting, addressed to specific people, with instructions that they were only to be opened when the tomb was eventually accessed. A letter to William, a letter to Harry, a letter to Earl Spencer, and reportedly letters to others whose identities have still not been shared. Imagine being William or Harry in that moment, standing in front of your mother's open grave and being handed a letter she wrote to you before she died. A letter she hid in the ground because she was not sure her words would survive any other way. The emotion in that chamber must have been unbearable. Then came the detail that silenced the room. A locket engraved with two initials, D and M Diana and Dodie, intertwined. It had never been mentioned publicly, not once in 27 years. In the weeks before the crash, the two had reportedly spoken about marriage. That locket suggested their relationship had been far deeper and far more serious than anyone had publicly acknowledged. If she was truly planning a future with him, that changes the question of what she had to lose and what others stood to lose if she lived. The letter she left behind. Inside a small jewelry box buried with Diana was a folded piece of paper, yellowed with age, carefully preserved. The handwriting was unmistakably hers. Those who have seen it say the words revealed a woman living in deep fear in the final months of her life. Not the kind of fear you push aside, the kind that follows you everywhere, the kind that keeps you awake at night. Diana had told her butler Paul Burrell that someone was planning to kill her, that they intended to do it in her car. She did not say this in a moment of panic or emotion. She said it calmly. That calmness is what makes it so disturbing. This was not hysteria. This was a woman who believed she had real information and was telling someone she trusted. But Burrell was not the only one she told. In 1995, 2 years before she died, Diana sat down privately with her solicitor, a lawyer named Lord Mishcon. She told him she had received information from a reliable source that she was going to be killed in a staged car accident. Mishcon took this seriously. He wrote it down. He signed it. He locked it in his firm's safe. After Diana died, he handed that document to the Metropolitan Police Commissioner. The police kept it locked away for 7 years. It did not become public until 2004 during a formal inquiry. 7 years. A signed legal record describing a specific threat against Diana's life, and it was buried in a drawer for 7 years. Diana knew that note existed. She also knew it was in the hands of institutions she did not trust. So she wrote her own version. She placed it in the tomb, somewhere no institution could touch it. The note found buried with her uses words like hunted, fearing, and accident, nearly identical to what she told Burrell. She was not confused, she was consistent, and she was terrified. There is more. In 1992, private phone calls between Diana and a close friend were secretly recorded and leaked to the press. An investigation later confirmed the calls had been intercepted. Who gave the order to record them was never established. Diana believed the state was watching her. If she kept any records of that surveillance, any evidence of who was listening, the tomb was exactly where she would have put them. She was also in discussions about a second television interview, a follow-up to her famous 1995 BBC Panorama appearance, one that would go further than anything she had said before. After her death, every negotiation around that project was quietly shut down, and the materials disappeared. Whether she kept notes about what she intended to say in that interview is unknown, but Diana was a woman who documented everything. She could not stop what was coming, but she made sure that when the ground was finally opened, the truth of what she feared would still be there. She built her own record, she buried it where no one could reach it, and she waited. She knew too much. On the night of August 31st, 1997, Diana's Mercedes left the Ritz Hotel in Paris. It entered the Pont de l'Alma tunnel. It never came out. The first emergency call was logged at 12:26 in the morning. The ambulance did not reach the hospital until 2 a.m. That is 1 hour and 40 minutes. The crash happened just a few miles from the hospital. The French emergency system works differently from the British or American approach. Instead of rushing the patient to hospital immediately, French doctors try to stabilize the patient at the scene first. That explains some of the delay. Dr. Jean-Marc Martigno arrived at the scene around 12:40 a.m. Diana was alive, but critically injured. She suffered a cardiac arrest at the scene, was brought back, and was finally placed in the ambulance at 1:18 a.m. The ambulance did not leave until 1:40 a.m. During the drive, it stopped again because her blood pressure dropped dangerously, and she was taken to Pitié-Salpêtrière Hospital, not Hôtel Dieu Hospital, which was much closer. Diana was still alive when the ambulance reached the hospital. Whether a faster response could have saved her is a question that has never been fully closed. Now, consider the cameras. 14 CCTV cameras were positioned around the Pont de l'Alma underpass. There was also a traffic camera mounted directly above the tunnel itself. That camera was operated by Paris's Urban Traffic Unit, a department that closed every night at 11 p.m. No overnight staff. No recordings after hours. Police could watch the feed live, but could not rewind or retrieve anything. Every other camera in the area was privately owned and pointed at building entrances, not the road. Not one camera captured anything useful. In one of the most filmed cities in the world, on one of its busiest routes, the most famous woman alive drove to her death, and there is no footage of it anywhere. That is not bad luck. That is a pattern. A second car was involved in the crash. Paint traces on Diana's wrecked Mercedes proved another vehicle had made contact inside the tunnel. That vehicle, a white Fiat Uno, was never found, and its driver was never officially identified. But investigators found a person of interest, a French photographer named James Anderson. He had told authorities he was not in Paris on the night of the crash. Investigators later placed him there, directly contradicting his own alibi. Anderson also had documented ties to French intelligence, meaning he had known connections to people working inside French government spy agencies. He was not an ordinary photographer. Then in 2000, 3 years after Diana's death, he was found dead inside a completely burned out car in a remote field. French authorities ruled it a natural death, but no full autopsy was carried out to properly establish how he died. A key person of interest with intelligence connections, who had lied about his whereabouts on the night Diana died, was dead. And the official conclusion was that nothing suspicious had happened. Diana had told her butler that someone was planning to kill her in a car. She had told her lawyer the exact same thing a year before she died, with enough detail that he wrote it down and signed it as a legal record. Her private phone calls had been secretly recorded. She was preparing a second television interview that would have gone further than anything she had said publicly. Her divorce agreement included legal clauses that stopped her from speaking about things she had witnessed inside the palace. She was building a new life, a new relationship, a future entirely outside the institution. She was carrying knowledge that certain powerful people could not afford to become public. Years after Diana's death, the journalist who broke the story of the Mishkan note said something that has never left the people who heard it. He said Diana did not die because she was in the wrong place at the wrong time. She died because she was exactly the right person, carrying exactly the right information, at exactly the wrong moment for the people who needed her silent. She knew too much. That is not a conspiracy theory. The truth she refused to bury. When the palace found out what had been discovered inside Diana's tomb, the response was immediate. This was not treated as a historical moment. It was treated as a threat. King Charles was informed within hours. By all accounts, his reaction was complicated. He knows what happened during that marriage. He knows what Diana saw and what she heard. He knows what she was capable of documenting. If what is inside that tomb confirms what she said publicly during her lifetime, the damage to his legacy could be permanent. Camilla's reaction was simpler. It was fear. Diana never hid how she felt about Camilla. If those documents contain specific accounts, named dates, detailed descriptions of things that have been publicly denied for decades, the consequences for the current queen consort would be severe and very public. The palace made contact with Earl Spencer. Informally, quietly, they asked about the contents of the documents. Spencer said no. And here is why that matters so much. The materials found in that tomb belong entirely to the Spencer family. They were found on Spencer land, in a Spencer burial site, left there by a Spencer. The crown has no legal claim to a single page. That might sound like a small legal detail, but it is not. The royal family has spent nearly 3 decades controlling Diana's image. deciding what gets released, deciding what gets buried, deciding how she is remembered and how she is described. For the first time, something connected to Diana exists completely outside their reach. They cannot access it. They cannot suppress it. They cannot manage it. Diana made sure of that. William is caught between two worlds, as he always is when it comes to his mother. He is a Spencer by blood, but he is the future king by duty. Sources say he wants the materials kept private. Harry, reportedly, wants the opposite. That is not just a disagreement between brothers. It is two men shaped by the same loss, pulling in completely different directions about what the world deserves to know about their mother. Earl Spencer has said nothing publicly about what he intends to do with what was found, but his position has been clear since the day Diana died. At her funeral in Westminster Abbey, he stood at the pulpit and delivered a eulogy that was a direct accusation aimed at the institution sitting in the pews in front of him. The congregation broke into applause. The royals sat in silence. Spencer has spent 27 years protecting his sister from the people who failed her. He is not going to give them the documents she hid specifically to keep them away. Diana did not leave quietly. She did not accept that the palace would write the final version of her story. She took her voice, put it in writing, and placed it somewhere that time and her own blood family controlled. Not the institution, not the palace, not the people who had spent years trying to silence her. This is not the story of a woman who died in a tunnel in Paris. This is the story of a woman who knew what was coming, prepared for it, and made absolutely sure that 27 years later, when the ground finally opened, she would still have the last word. And she does.